This data has been provided by Southwest with the impact of adding the 2 additional buses in the Cataract area next year. So this year, we've been running 4 buses in the Cataract area, and we would be going up to 6 buses. And based on the ridership that we have as of today, meaning this could change based on if that ridership were to change, we're anticipating that the longest ride time for a Southside student would be 46 minutes in the morning and 56 minutes in the afternoon. The longest ride time for a Herman student would be 1 hour and 9 minutes in the morning and 59 minutes in the afternoon, with the earliest pickup time for any student in the Cataract area being 6:24 a.m. The average ride time for students in the Cataract area will be 45 minutes, meaning there will be some less than 45 minutes, and then I just described the ones for the longest. Additionally, we will be doing a group stop at the Cataract Elementary School, unless for that school were not available, we would do a different public location right in town in Cataract. And that group stop would have an approximate departure time of 7 a.m., meaning that if any parents so chose to drop off their students at that drop-off point, the students could then catch the bus at that drop-off point into the city of Sparta to one of our schools here.
Thank you, Ms. Hauser. So, so there really are 2 items here. First, we will discuss and deal with item A, which is granting the exception for cataract parents. And then we will go to item B as a separate, which deals with the current exceptions to Article 173. So first, cataract parents discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Hendricks, if I could just for a little bit of clarification, I know Ms. Hauser states in the bottom there, the last bullet, Cataract Elementary School or other public location. At the moment, I know that we've talked a number of times, whatever we do with the Cataract building, we've talked about coordinating a section of that parking lot that could be moved over to a transfer site. So if and when we get rid of the building, maybe we maintain some of that parking lot to be able to have a transfer site for years to come. So that was one thing. And then the other thing to think about is as parents and families choose to utilize that transfer site, these rural routes will become less travel time as well, because you're not having as many stops along the morning and afternoon routes. So just to keep in mind as we're having the conversation.
Other discussion.
I have a question. With the now 6 buses in the Cataract area, that's up from 4, how many students are we servicing? Okay. Because what I'm getting at is that if we have less students that are staying in the Sparta district and are going to a different school, we technically shouldn't need that many buses, which would help in that area of cost as well.
Yep, that's a good point. So we don't, we have our open enrollment applications. We have looked at our enrollees and our withdrawals. So kind of finalizing that process, and we haven't seen a large change as of today in that. So the ridership is based off of the ridership we had last year, because we haven't seen a drastic change in our true enrollees and withdrawals. So if that were to change over the course of the summer, we definitely could look at those number of buses. I would think that we would want to stay close to these times. So if we could stay close to these times with one less bus, we would definitely do that if possible.
So we can make that adjustment as needed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions for clarification? Otherwise, it would be appropriate to have a motion, and if we don't get a motion, then we'll move on.
I recommend to the full board that we grant the exception to Article 73 due to Cataract Elementary School, the school closing and helping those families in Cataract.
We have a motion by Ms. Prestwood. Is there a second?
Can I have a question?
Sure.
Still first, okay, so the Cataract Elementary School public group stop, that is, or group stop, that is not for the cataract families open enrolling out. That is for the
Correct.
cataract families coming to Sparta Area School District. So we don't have an evening drop or a drop off after school. It's just a pickup in the morning. After school,
That
the
is a
kids
great
go
question.
directly to.
I
their homes.
am unsure of the answer, but I don't see why we couldn't. I just don't have a time for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I
Yep.
was just thinking the students that are dropped off at the group stop in the morning are delivered to their homes in the afternoon.
I will have to check with Southwest and get back to you. I can get back to you before the full board meeting. I didn't catch that until now, but you're correct. I believe there could be a group stop there in the afternoon though as well. I would just have to confirm what that time would be.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Ms. Lopez seconds the motion. Any other discussion?
I think it's a good idea and there are extenuating circumstances. I don't know that I'd go along with a motion that doesn't have a timeline on it.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to have this never be reviewed again or not reviewed. So we're looking at a policy from 2006. I think it'd be a good idea to figure out how long we want to have this before it's reviewed again.
Yep. So what I was thinking is that we could amend that motion so that we could have a sunset clause on that. Sparta Area School District is ready and willing to pick up students right at the homes of the cataract community, and that this is an extenuating circumstance, as I believe for the students that are currently that were currently in the Cataract Elementary School. But beyond that, we should put a sunset clause on that so that at least it has a timer for it to end, and that way future boards could look into it instead of us. So then in case of something per se with the state changes and our entire formulas change with open enrollment numbers and whatnot, we can also look into that and how we're impacted. Not necessarily on a yearly basis, but I would honestly say a 3-year basis. So I'd like to amend Heidi's motion to have a sunset clause of 3 years.
Of 3 years. So there's two ways that we can proceed with this. One would be if Heidi would accept this as a friendly amendment to her motion. Otherwise, it would go to the board to vote on your amendment. Ms. Presswood?
Emily, what do you think? Thank you.
Look, I understand the thought process of this being an extenuating circumstance. I'm not in disagreement with that at all. I believe we are the Sparta School Board, so we need to figure out how we can help keep our students in the Sparta School District as much as possible. So I feel that as an answer to the extenuating circumstances is why we're adding bus routes, is why we're creating a transfer location for those parents that are choosing to stay in the district. We're making it more efficient and trying to make it more economical and less travel time for the students. If I felt that I could look at any one of our educators within the district and say, I think Melrose is better for these students, then I would be able to vote in favor of that. But there's not a single educator in Sparta that I could look at and say, I'm going to support helping students leave our district to go to another one, when I know that we have a phenomenal staff and district right here. So that's why I'm having trouble with supporting this part. The extenuating circumstance, I get it, but we need to find the best way that we can as a board to support our district and the students that should be coming into our district.
So first we need to solve this amendment issue. Ms. Presswood, is this a friendly amendment or is it going to a vote?
I'm gonna take it to a vote.
I'm sorry?
Can we take it to a vote?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
So, Mr. Wells, you will need to state your amendment just a little bit more clearly and succinctly so that we can get a second.
So at the end of Ms. Presswood's amendment, and I don't know exactly what she said word for word, but I would like to add a 3-year sunset clause to that amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the motion to add a 3-year sunset clause. Is there a second to that amendment?
So every 3 years, if somebody is open enrolled out, a family is open enrolled out, they have to come back to the district to get permission to continue to stay open enrolled out.
This
Not
is- Sorry, this is just, my understanding is this is just for the Cataract Elementary School bus route. It has nothing to do with
Right.
with B.
So for instance, Emily has students at the elementary school. So her second grader in 3 years, she has to come back and ask for this extenuating circumstance again when her daughter's in 5th grade. And then again in 8th grade or 9th grade. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Well, it wouldn't be a 3-year rolling. At the end of 3 years, the board will need to decide whether or not to continue or not continue. At that time, they could make it another 3-year sunset, or they could just do away with it completely, or they could make it a 5-year sunset. The motion just right now is at the end of 3 years, the board will need to revisit this issue or it will go away.
But just based on what I've heard from the Cataract community, a lot of them have said that they leave no matter what. And I think that having this 3-year sunset addresses their needs while also prioritizing the needs of, we should be keeping our students, and that we are still and always will be willing to pick up students at their homes.
Okay, I'm going to cut off the discussion until we have a second, because we don't even have a second on this amendment yet.
I will second Todd's
All
amendment.
right, thank you. Further discussion then on the amendment?
Can I ask Mr. Wells why 3 years? What was the thought behind that?
3 years, it will give an entirely new board to surface it. That's also the majority of our cataract students. And that's really it. It's just it's not just an easy number. It allows a new board to look into it, and it also the state funding model changes every 2, so we wouldn't be very far behind that in case if our funding model were to dramatically change. So at least if there's an anticipated close if our funding model were to dramatically change. So that's really it.
I feel though that in 3 years, right now we have the extenuating circumstance and families have made the decision to enroll out. And I know we have to keep as many kids in the district as possible, but we also have to rebuild trust and we also have to rebuild this bond that has been broken. I think in 3 years though, when it's a new board, they're going to say it's no longer an extenuating circumstance and they're going to shut it down. And then they have to find transportation again. They have to figure it out again. And it kind of puts them in the same predicament that they're in right now.
I think part of the process for me, when I take a look at how we're going to try to build trust and bridge the gap, are coming some future items here. And so I don't bulk giving Melvin the opportunity to come into our district and leave with our kids as part of that process. I look at the transportation part as part of the process. I look at what we're going to talk about doing with the property as part of the process. And I look at the items that have been requested by the PTO that are going to be coming up as part of that rebuilding process. So again, allowing an outside district to come in and take our students away when every one of us should feel the best opportunity for each of those students is right here in this school or at Herman or at Southside. I don't understand how we can get behind that as a board when we're the Sparta School Board, because we have these other opportunities to build that trust again, to bridge the gap with that community.
Further discussion specifically to the amendment.
I'm not sure if this is specific to the amendment. I believe it is, but is this drop off? If you look at it from another perspective, it's also very helpful for the parents of Sparta Area School District students who are not open and rolling out, who perhaps don't want their children picked up at 6:30. Maybe they're passing Cataract Elementary at 6:55 and can drop their students off there. I think it serves a dual purpose. I think it helps those Cataract families who are hurting right now. And I think it also helps, or could potentially help, some Sparta Area School District families who are not open and rolling out.
So
Perhaps, but I mean, in terms of that sunset clause,
well, the group stop is going to happen. This is our
This is
discussion
based
and
on
action
class.
right now is
Right.
independent of the group stop.
Correct.
okay.
So no matter what, we're
but-
doing a group stop for
Right, but
Sparta.
but the talk is whether or not we have a sunset clause on it.
No, the sunset clause will be on the Melmin agreement.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
The
misunderstood.
Yep.
Okay,
extenuating circumstance to
Right.
let the other district come in to pick up the kids that have open and rolled out.
Okay.
It's my understanding that we're going to have a transfer site in Cataract moving forward.
okay, I
Yeah.
misunderstood. I apologize. Okay.
So I'll call for the vote on the amendment only. This is specifically to adding the 3-year sunset. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's do it again. All those in favor, show of hands, please. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So now we have an amendment to the motion, and there's a 3-year sunset to granting the exception to Article 173 for cataract parents. Further discussion?
I
Yes.
just have a clarification with the motion. Are you indicating that they would have Melman only, or any district that wants to come into our school district can pick a spot?
If I'm reading the
My motion
item.
was to possibly recommend to the full board in granting the exception to Article 173 due to Cataract Elementary School closure.
So if a student is open enrolling to Toma could come in and pick them up.
Nope, I think that it would
Okay.
be an extenuating circumstance and they would have to come and present their case to the board.
So you're saying it's specific to students who formerly attended Cataract School?
Correct.
But what happened, I'm just looking for
Absolutely.
So
clarify.
here's
There's
another-
Melman, we may have some cataract students who've open enrolled to other districts other than Melman.
Well, and here's the thing now that we're getting into, this is just for elementary kids from Cataract, because there may be some middle school and high school kids that are in that Cataract area that the whole family wants to send they want to send all of their kids to Melmin now. So, and am I correct in that there have been some open enrollment applications, not just for elementary students, but for middle and high school? So you gotta be really careful about how we're wording this, because from what it sounds like right there, we're just allowing the elementary students that were at Cataract. So is that what we're doing, or are we allowing the Cataract area the opportunity to leave and go to Melrose?
That's why I'm just asking the question.
Absolutely, that's a
about
great question.
Because
The
I
intent
can't-
of the motion?
The intent of the motion was granting the exception to families that have open and rolled out due to the closure of the school.
And so when you say family, so it doesn't matter what grade level,
Correct.
okay, of any grade level, and specific to Melmin, so Black River Falls cannot come and take a Cataract student.
Correct. We haven't heard anybody from Black River.
Well,
We have-
but I want to be clear here.
Right. So, and I feel that because we have representation from Cataract and that is the most we've heard is female men, that if we have other families that are open rolling out, that they come and plead their case to us. I think we do it a case by case situation.
That's not what we're doing here, though. We're grouping a whole community together based on one person's communication tonight. Now, I know there's more communication. I know we've had more communication than that, but I don't see that as a valid argument. Ms. Lopez, did you have a question? Or would you like some clarification?
Could we have some clarification? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I need some clarification because I am confused. As I'm looking at this, I don't see anything about
This
Cat-
is
Take
B.
this-
This is
yeah, take the
second.
slide
This is
away.
B. Take the slide off.
This is what
Okay,
what
this-
we're
yeah.
trying to do for the Sparta Area School District
Okay,
this
so-
coming year.
So that was 3B and we're discussing.
Nope, that was 3A.
We're still on 3A. We're discussing if we should allow a Millman bus stop in the Cataract community because Cataract Elementary was,
Okay.
they were shut down and that majority, I want to say, of students decided to open roll out. Majority of those students decided to open enroll to Melrose Medora. So based on the talks of just me skimming through Cataract Elementary support pages and what the community is asking for me, general emails, the common talk is Melrose Medora. I haven't heard of Black River Falls, or I haven't heard a Toma, I haven't heard of West Salem, Bangor. We could list the entire school districts of Wisconsin. The only one that I've heard is Milton. So I think we could add that confidently. And
Other discussion?
Did that clarify anything?
Yes, I apologize. Thank you.
No, that's
don't
fine.
apologize.
Yeah, no need to apologize.
Well, I won't support this, and I'll tell you why. We're given the impression, the message that I've received at least, is that we owe this to the Cataract families because of this closure of the school. And we owe the Cataract families the same thing that we owe every other family within the Sparta Area School District, and that is good facilities, good programs, excellent teachers, safe transportation. And that is available to all the families in the Sparta Area School District, including the Cataract families. And so I believe that by making this decision due to what I think is perhaps a misguided sense of guilt or something, that we should allow this. I just think that it's a poor choice. And again, it sends the wrong message to the rest of our district that the other schools aren't good enough. And that's just not the case. We provide an excellent option. And if the parents in the Cataract area choose not to take advantage of that option, that's fine. And that's their right. But I don't think that we have an obligation to facilitate that decision any more than we would do that for children who live in Leon or any of the other out of city areas. So I will vote against this.
So some of your great teachers you're talking about, they left the district too because of Cataract closing. And I don't know, I feel that we support our families and we show support by giving this. And if we have to give them a sunset of 3 years in order to get this go through, then that's better than nothing. And I feel that, yeah, these kids, they're not going to come back. Open enrollment was due April 29th, right? So they're not going to change their mind and come back because we're offering better busing solutions, which are great for the kids and the families that still are going to stay in the school district.
Yeah, and I'm not recommending this. I'm not doing this because I'm hoping they'll come back. I'm doing this for all the other families in this district and showing them that we value what we have.
so just another thing, I understand that enrollment is a touchy subject. I understand that there's a lot of emotions and flair in the air. And that was the main reason why I also really like that additional 3, like the 3 years and then the cutoff. Mainly because there's a lot of concerned people in town who are just like, why are all these students leaving? Well, some of them leave just because they want to, like John points out. And we will have students leave due to Cataract Elementary closure. What I'm hoping is that this alleviates some of the stresses that we have, and that eventually they will come back. And if they don't come back, that's fine. That's their decision. But otherwise, the 3 years at least says, it says two things. We're willing to address the needs that the cataract community are begging for, so much that the town of Little Falls come to a vote and approved a bus stop for their township, like at their town facility. And that we can address the other side of that this isn't a permanent fix, and that we are willing to have those students come back if they so choose. And we are willing to make it so that those students come back if they so choose. Because this bus stop shouldn't be designed to be permanent. I think we've well known that Cataract Elementary was going to close. The referendum vote has obviously increased the likelihood of that. And we have seen that. And moving forward, it kind of creates a compromise, that 3 years.
But Mr. Wells, who is the compromise with? Here's the thing. If those are not the only things that people are going to say or be thinking about, we are going to have 2,800 other students or 2,850 other students and 400 staff members that said, our board made it okay to allow another district into our district to take our students away, the students in our district, rather than finding every possible way or opportunity to build bridges without taking students away, building bridges and doing other aspects that don't take away from our district. We have great facilities. We have amazing staff. I agree, we are losing some amazing staff, but we have amazing staff still, and we're gonna have amazing staff going into next year. They're not all going away. We're conveying a message that it's okay for another district to come in and take our students away. And that's saying we think that that district is better than this district. And we are this school board. We are not a Melman school board.
I vehemently disagree.
I thought we were here for all of our students. But to me, there's still 70 students in Cataract. There's still 70 students that we have to care for,
And
even if they aren't in our district.
I understand, but so you honestly are thinking those 70 students are better off in Melrose Mindoro than in your Sparta schools that you're representing?
I don't know. I can't
Well, no, that's
answer
what your vote,
that.
that's what your vote is stating. That's what the vote is saying.
My vote is stating that I am here
That's
to
not-
support our families that have been devastated by the decision that we made.
And that's why we add a bus routes, and that's why
Right,
we.
Tony,
there are
this
I'm
isn't-
sorry, yeah,
This
go
isn't
ahead.
about bus routes.
No, I
It's
understand
just
that.
not.
No, I know
It's
that.
about people who are mad.
All right, so,
So-
no, that's fine. So let's keep in mind that this is, the action that we're taking right now is to recommend to the full board. So we're going to vote on this again. So we'll have time, to consider this some more unless it gets defeated.
No, I'm sorry. I really appreciate the discussion. I would really like to hear, before we bring this to a close, I'd like to hear Mr. Burns Gilbert and Mr. McKenna speak, and Ms. Lopez would like to speak, she so can. I believe that me and Pat are sitting on the aisle on both of the issues, the issue that led up to this moment, and this moment right now. So I want to hear what Pat McKenna would have to say. Or Mr. Burns Gilbert.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also, I could go either way because Mr. Schulz and Mr. Hendricks make good points, right? I have a lot of faith that the students that stay with our district are going to get a quality experience. I mean, being at Herman and seeing the community that's built there is pretty special that last week of class. So that's not a concern for me about the quality of what we offer. I think we can, if it puts some good faith back into the community, not just Cataract, but the larger community for some, that makes a lot of sense to me. There might be some, to me, I think the extenuating circumstance too comes back to the election and the referendum. And I don't know if our city has ever seen that type of influence before, right? And so that to me is also something that stands out in this decision of extenuating circumstances. 3 years seems a little long. I would maybe be in favor of reducing that if we want to go back through that amendment process again. But I think having that timestamp also allows people a chance to heal, allows people a chance to adjust, might build some good faith for future collaborations down the road. Who knows, we might be a Sparta regional district down the road in 60 years because we can't tell the future, but that's another piece on my mind of how can we build better relationships, not only with our community, but with our surrounding partners. But at the same time, does this set precedents for future decisions? I think, to me, unless we close, Montessori and Maplewood, there's not going to be another building anytime soon that would have this similar situation come up. I agree. I think Ms. Presswood laid it out. I think each of those would be case by case scenarios, and we whoever's on the board would make decisions at that time, and it can be different because the situation will be different. So I think, yeah, those are some of my pros, some of my cons. Don't like the idea that I'm making it easier for people to leave and things like that. And at the same time, they're leaving anyway. So, right, to me, that there's layers of compassion and empathy that come into play that how can we make the best for the most people, and knowing that we're doing some really quality things for the people that do stay. That's kind of where I land on it. Do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Flip to you. Pass the
Thank
mic.
you. Yeah, I agree with 95% of the things you said. When we made the decision to close the Cataract School, that decision was made. It was made by this board, and I back it 100%. And I will back every decision that we make as a board 100%. So I'm not going back in time. The decision we make now has an impact of the finance of that decision. The only way that we get maximum impact is to get some of these kids back. If we get one, it's a better decision. If we get 5, it's better than that. The reason these parents are choosing to take their kids to Melrose isn't because Sparta is a bad school district. It isn't because we have bad teachers or we have bad facilities. It's because they're mad. They're making a decision based on emotion. The best thing to fix emotion is time. Let's show them we care about them. It's okay. Let's give them just a little bit of a hug and let them have their way. 3 years from now, things have calmed down. Maybe they come back. Maybe they don't, but it's not going to be any worse. Let's just give them something to show them that they matter to us. If we could get back 25% of the kids that are leaving, does that affect our bottom line? How much closer does that put us, Leah? It gets us closer to the right answer. That's all this is about.
Any further discussion?
I just want to clarify one thing. Our data shows that no students have really left yet. Remember, open enrollment does not automatically mean students and families are leaving. So just to make it very clear, we have a lot of students that open enroll that choose to still stay in our district for whatever reason. So just to make it clear that just because you open enroll does not mean that students are automatically leaving. And I don't have the data to show what % of that is true, but just to be
Completely
very
understand
clear.
that, Sam, but I think it would be best for us not to plan for worst case scenario.
I'm not disagreeing with
And
that.
we have both options. So we have the stop in Cataract that Southwest is providing, but then we also have the stop for that Melrose Mindoro. I think best case is we do both and we make majority everybody happy with that as it sits.
All right, so we'll have a roll call vote. Remember, this is a recommendation to the full board to allow the exception for cataract families. And this exception would sunset in 3 years, 3 school years. Roll call vote?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 No. Motion passes 5-2. Recommendation will go to the full board. Next, discussion and possible recommendation in grandfathering the 2 current exceptions to Article 173.
As we stated earlier, once again, for past 5 years, we've had an agreement with Melmin and Norwalk, Ontario Wilton School Districts that have granted this exception that we have found. So the question to the school board is, do we continue those agreements or do we grandfather them in to next school year and beyond? So that's the question that is in front of the school board at this time. Do we grandfather the 2 exceptions to Article 173 that we have found?
I would move to approve the recommendations to the full board, the grandfathering of the current exceptions to Article 173.
I'll second that.
Mr. Schulze made the motion. Ms. Presswood seconded the recommendation. Further discussion.
I just wanted to say, just because none of us really made the decision, I don't think we should cut it off. And it would be really disrespectful of us. I don't think anyone has been here longer than 4 years. So if this is a 6-year agreement, I honestly think it's foolish to jump off that bridge. But
I agree with Todd. It impacted us enough that we had to do research to find it.
Well, to add a bit of levity here, one of us did have a role in that decision. He just doesn't remember it. And,
story.
Since we're granting the exception to the cataract families, I certainly wouldn't oppose this recommendation either. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, going,
I didn't have it placed under consent.
would you like to have it, please?
I think, Mr. Russ, we can do that under consent, can't we? Yeah, let's
Yes,
go
you
ahead.
may.
Let's,
Yep.
let's place that under consent. Thank
Unless
you.
there's an objection, hearing none, okay, that will go to consent.
Thank you for that.
Item C, discussion on possible recommendations to approve the next steps for the Cataract Elementary School property.
I will take this. So within the past couple of years, we have sold 2 other buildings in our district, the old middle school on East Franklin Street and Lakeview Elementary. And so my question is, I'm hoping we can have some dialogue with the board tonight as far as what you would like to see with the Cataract building. And I can help give some input on what we may want to see out of the process. And we can hopefully set some deadlines and get some direction for moving forward. So a request for proposal or an RFP is a document that we would prepare as a district. It basically says what the building is, if there's been, the ages to the different mechanical systems, what upgrades or replacements there may have been, what the purpose of the building has been, if we have any requests as far as what the purpose is going forward or some preferences. And so it goes through and really describes kind of what's on the table for sale. And then we can release that RFP to either specific parties, or we can put it out through websites and things that deal with this, where any interested parties, whether local or across the state or the nation, could come in and say that they're interested in the building. And so in that way, we could ask for a certain price, like how you would sell a home, or we could leave it open-ended and see what we get. So for instance, with the old middle school, we did not list a price, but rather we had people with different purposes for the building come forth and give us their price, but then also what they were hoping to do with the building, so that we could make sure that we picked not only what would generate the most income, but what would generate the most positive use of that facility for the future, for the community. And so I would recommend doing that RFP process so that we can have some decision points as far as what the future of that building may look like for the community, as well as looking at the value of the building. Kind of going along with that, I think the board would maybe want to have some discussions about what a committee to sell that building might look like, what opportunities there might be for public input, things of that nature. So I don't know if you want to take it back over, Mr. Hendricks, for any of that discussion, and then we can talk timeline.
So what you're suggesting is a board committee or a committee just to include board representation?
So previously, we did a board-directed committee that had board participation, but also community participation. That worked really well. I have no reason not to recommend that, but it's the will of the board, whatever you prefer.
My concern would be, as with the sale of the Leon School, there might be community interest in the purchase. And would it be problematic then to have community members on the committee?
Oh, go ahead, Todd.
Doesn't it become the call of the board anyways? So,
Yes,
I
it would
mean-
have to go to the annual meeting in order to approve a sale.
Not
No?
anymore. That's
Not anymore.
changed. Yep, that's the old one.
all right.
Sorry.
So, if I could just start out with discussion. I would first like to know the estimated value of the property. I want to do the right thing, but I also have, we also have to realize in the current financial situation that we're in, that we can't be necessarily charitable.
Well, I think
Yep.
that would be one of the responsibilities of this committee would be to look at those things,
Mhm.
correct?
I
But
think,
that's one of the even if the committee decides yes or no, I think that's one of the standards that should be in place.
for me, so I'd like to make this recommendation because it's two-part for me. Can I go ahead and make a recommendation? Okay, so I'm going to move to make a recommendation to approve the RFP process and the creation of a committee for the Cataract Elementary School property. Now, the reason I'm doing that is I do feel we should have some of the Cataract community members as part of that committee. I think, again, for me, this is part of the bridging process, right? And I feel that we should allow some of the Cataract committee or a community to be part of the committee, and then we should allow for that public input from Cataract and other parts of the district. So that's going to be my recommendation.
So, so you recommend making that motion to recommend to the full board the RFP process and a committee to include members of the public, and the board president, I assume, will select the members of the committee.
Absolutely.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I wasn't trying to kill discussion. I just wanted to get the recommendation out there so everybody knew what we were talking
Mr.
about.
Hendricks, if I may clarify, these are typically advisory committees. So regarding the comment about dual interest, this committee would likely give pros and cons or recommendations, but they are not a decision-making committee typically.
Thank you for that, clarification. Okay. So again, this is a recommendation to the full board.
So correct me if I'm wrong, biggest positive of the RFP over just selling it is we can control what it's going to be used for on the backside.
Ms. Lopez?
Yes, so with this committee, will this be an open committee? I didn't hear that in your motion.
Absolutely, it
so
will. Yes.
There will be public input.
It has,
available.
I feel it has to have,
Thank
allow
you.
for that. Yeah.
And is this for to go on consent?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Mr. Hendricks, if we could continue some discussion
Sure.
regarding the timeline. So I've already begun crafting the RFP with working with Mr. Fromm and Mr. Stearman on what the building components are to make sure that we have a well-informed RFP. Part of the RFP, though, is that we also have a timeline. And so I jotted down a few things just to keep us aware of that we continue to incur costs and or potential liability the longer that we hold on to the building. So we need to maintain the heating and cooling at least to a degree that the building infrastructure stays sound. Unfortunately, we're so advanced that our heating and cooling needs the internet too. So we have an internet service up there as well. Regarding the security of the building, I have asked Mr. Stearman to leave the security cameras just because it is out of town a little bit. So just to make sure that we have that security system in place, which those also need internet access. And then, of course, we want to maintain the lawn care in the grounds of that building while it's still ours. So that all being said, is the intent of the board that we would start this process kind of as soon as possible, or we've already begun working on clearing out the building. The staff did have more time than some of the other buildings to get things arranged under the circumstances. We do still have equipment and things there that need to be moved out, but I'm just curious on the timeline.
What is approximate total monthly expense?
Mr. Stearman, do you happen to know the internet cost monthly?
While they're looking that up, my thought process on this is it's going to be an immediate. We're going to have an idea of who would be a part of the committee. Once we have full board approval, we're going to get it scheduled and set up immediately.
Okay.
When is the timeline specifically for the sale of the building or just the committee itself?
It will be all of it. If the board's okay, I can just work with Mr. Schulte on the timeline too, with understanding we'll move as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so just out of curiosity, what was for the sale of the old middle school, the old administrative office?
Mhm.
How long did that take? Just when we could set it absolute.
I would say at least a couple of months. So you form the committee, typical process, you would form the committee, you would meet to kind of go over the building. At that point, before we even started receiving the proposals, we talked about what the community may like to see. And I believe we did that even before issuing the RFP, so we could put some of those ideas in there to say what kind of things we may be interested in. Then typically those who submit a proposal like to tour the buildings, you need to allow time to set up for tours. They also came and gave presentations with pictures or, so on. So allowing time for kind of a selection process. Think of when you're hiring, you kind of screen resumes and, do interviews. It's that kind of a similar type process where we would do some screening, do some interviews, make some recommendations. So I would say about a couple months.
Yeah, and I don't see this being a long process. I know the community is very motivated to be active in this process, so I don't see it being long at all.
Anything else? No. All right, very good.
About $500 to $600 a month for the internet access, security, the equipment's already there. And then lawn care we do in-house. So.
All right, moving on to item D, discussion and possible recommendations to approve cataract items to be donated to the cataract community per cataract PTO communication. And this would be hopefully going to the consent agenda.
If you don't mind, can we wait just 1 minute before we go there? I had one more slide. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So all other furniture and equipment in that building, with the exception of what will be on the next agenda item, which was PTO donated initially. Our plan is that we would first provide an opportunity to Southside and Montessori faculty to come into the building. When we did the building reconfigurations for those two schools, new furniture was not part of their budget. So we would like to offer that opportunity first internally to those two buildings. And then our board policy is that any furniture equipment we dispose of through auction. Again, this is not in relation to any PTO related donations. That's on the next agenda item. So the question is, would the board like us to continue with that policy of disposing through auction? That would give fair opportunity to any local organizations through the auction process. The reason we're asking is we have had some requests from the cataract community through PTOs, Sportsman's Club and such. We have had a request from one of the parochial schools. We know we have other local charities in town that do work, nonprofits that do work with students as well. So the board does not need to take action if they're comfortable with the auction process. Otherwise, if you would like us to do something different, we surely can.
So theoretically, after the south, after the equipment is distributed or some of it to Southside and Montessori, what potentially could be raised through auction of the remaining equipment? I mean, is it worth it to go through the effort? I'm assuming not. So
Probably not.
from my perspective, I would think allowing a donation to the Cataract community, to the parochial schools, to others, would make perfect sense.
And we can gladly do that if the board would like that.
I would
We
ag-
would just need an amendment to board policy.
I would agree. I just like to see maybe a list of what's there before we actually make the donation.
Absolutely. We'll add it to a future agenda item.
Yeah, we can look at that adding to the full board meeting.
Yeah, yeah, I'd like to, because I mean, some things do hold sentimental value and other things we could potentially do for auction because they're not worth much more to the local communities more than their actual value.
There wasn't
So-
a lot left, honestly.
Right.
I was there the last day of
Okay.
school and a lot of things were already earmarked for Montessori and Southside.
Yeah.
So a lot of the larger items, library shelving, desks, chairs, things like that, already have a place going.
Yeah, our district's gonna allocate a vast majority of the materials there.
Oh,
So,
right.
yeah.
So,
We'll bring a list to a future board meeting. If we can put estimated values, we will, but I would agree that there probably wouldn't be a lot of value, and then we can make that decision in a future meeting. Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you. Okay, then now we're moving on to item D. Discussion and possible recommendations to approve district items currently housed at Cataract Elementary to be donated to the Cataract community per the request of the Cataract PTO, and that would be under consent.
So the PTO through Miss Arlene Sprague has been in communication with us about some items that the PTO made monetary, for the most part, monetary donations to the district with specific intent of how that money would be used. And those items are the playground installed outside, kitchen set that was used, I believe, in the pre-kindergarten classroom for the learn and play type model. Some playground carts, things that the kids would bring outside with their balls and such in them, along with the baskets that go with those carts. There are some benches installed outside around the buildings, including memorial benches that they're interested in. And then there's a book house, which is those little houses on the pedestals and, outside that have community books in there. And they are requesting that although they made the donation to the district, that we would consider donating the items that were purchased with their monetary donation back to them to be used in their community as they see fit. And the playground specifically, if we go to the next slide. I have received a phone call from the president of the Cataract Sportsman's Club, who is extremely interested in the playground set. They have volunteers who have the capabilities to remove the playground and reinstall it at their location. They have offered that they would also remove wood chips, redo the grass, things of that nature. I did reach out to our insurance agency just to see if there was anything we should know of from a liability standpoint. They recommended that if we were to do this as part of this, we would request the club. So we'd put in the request that they then have the equipment inspected after they reinstall it, just to make sure the kids stay safe on their reinstall. And then there's basically a waiver form that we would have them sign, just that the equipment is sold as is.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
So I'll remind the group, we are about a quarter of the way through our agenda. Is there any discussion on this item?
Mr. Hendricks, I'd make a motion to recommend full approval to the board, the cataract items to be donated to the cataract community per the cataract PTO communication and place it under consent.
so,
I'd second that.
yeah. My concern is the playground and just because with our, like, for example, the Leon sale, I just don't want the community to move their playground equipment and then find out it wasn't worth it, because catching my,
The cataract community thinks it's worth it. I can guarantee it.
no, I mean, if the cataract community were to purchase the building, it's not worth moving it everywhere.
Well, we can talk about that at a further time, I would say.
Further discussion. We have a motion and a second. All those, there's no great value. Go ahead. I was just figuring in my mind if we needed a roll call vote because of the value of the donation, but please.
I was just gonna ask, Ms. Hauser, do you know what a cost for that, to get that re-inspected after it's installed? Any idea on what that would look like?
I do not know the cost, but I would recommend that it's not a cost to us. It's more of a recommendation to the club that we would recommend they get it inspected. And we can provide the name of who could do, like, so we can help them with what that would look like, but that it would be their cost, not ours. And then they could choose to do that or not.
And then my other question, and this is more of a timeline piece, but it sounds like this is flexible. Just considering what we talked about with the RFP process, if having a playground or not would make or break a sale, right? Is that something like this we can build in and see how that plays out over the next 2 months with the RFP process? Or what is that? How do those timelines merge?
Yep. That is an option. It's whatever the board chooses. We've had the request for the donation, so whether we'd like to grant that request before going through the RFP process, or if we would rather wait, that's a board decision. Yep.
So Mr. Burns, one option here would be a motion to table this decision for a couple months until we have a better idea of this prospects for selling and whether or not having the playground equipment there would enhance the sale. Just suggestion.
As part of the RFP, we could have that as an option to look at the optional value as well.
Right. So we do have a motion, however, and a second. And if the motion succeeds, then we move ahead. If you want us to wait until after the sale, we need a different action. Or is the business department going to drag their feet for 2 months until we know some more information?
Remember, this is a recommendation to the full board too.
Right.
So we have we do have some time the board can change their mind if they wish to do so.
What I could do is I could reach out to the president of the Sportsman's Club, let them know that we're interested in the donation. We're conscious that the building may stay part of the community. And basically, would they be willing to hold off on the removal to know if it becomes a community? Basically, it will be donated back to the community one way or the other, just the location is yet to be determined.
All right, so we will go to the full board. Another possibility when it gets to the full board is just to break out the playground equipment, because we don't want to give anyone the impression we're going to keep the benches, that we're going to, any of those other things. Okay, you understand the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. It'll go to the full board. Item E, discussion and possible recommendations to approve the purchase of a computer lab for the tech ed department at Sparta High School. Mr. Stearman.
Yep, thank you. So going to do a quick way back history overview. 6 or 7 years ago, we had probably almost a dozen computer labs in the district, and we had no one-to-one devices for students. Over the last 6 years, we've completely flipped that, where we currently have no computer labs and every student has a device. So going through that, we had COVID, we had a lot of different things going on. We tried a lot of different ways to do things. And what we're finding is that we found lots of really good ways to do lots of really good learning, but that there were a few, we'll call them pressure spots, where the solutions that we came up with the one-to-one devices didn't work as well as they should. And this is one of those ones where we thought this is something that we need. This is something where we're not meeting the greater needs for this type of programming. So what we have is VDI is a virtual. So like a student can pull up their iPad or their Chromebook and they can run like a virtual Windows PC on it. The problem with that is that it doesn't work very well with high-end applications. They can do web browsing, they can do Microsoft Office with it, but when you're talking about doing a CAD file to do something that you're going to CNC mill in one of our machines, those virtual things can't connect up to the machines. They don't provide an easy way to transport files, and it takes forever to do a really tiny thing that should be super quick. So we've talked with Western TC, we've talked with Matthews, and they've said this is kind of the industry standard. If you want to be offering transcripted classes, if you want to give kids the experience to be able to have what they need to be able to function when they come to the job site, this is kind of what we're looking at. So what we're asking for is for the high school specifically to have a tech ed computer lab that's geared primarily towards their curriculum. So SolidWorks is the biggest piece of software that they use for that. And to be able to purchase those for them. It's stuff that's industry standard. It's the same type of stuff Western TC uses for their classes. Cost-wise for that is approximately 35 to 45,000. We're going to reuse some existing monitors, keyboards, and mice that we have, and we're going to primarily just be buying the hardware, the towers for them to plug in. So that'll be a little bit of a cost savings for us. But those are higher end PCs, so they're running roughly 1,300 to 2,500 a computer, depending on what's available when. The other tricky part of this is supply is super difficult for electronics still, especially high-end computers. So I don't have a exact quote for a model for you guys to approve, because everything we get goes out of stock and 3 days later. I've gotten 10 quotes for computers and none of them are in stock right now. So I can give you guys a range that says 35 to 45,000 is about what it'll cost us to get a tech ed lab at the high school. And if we can get approval to spend that much on the tech ed lab, we can figure out what's in stock when we're ready to order. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Budget wise, we found savings in the existing budget for it. We had that, if you remember, 110,000 for security cameras that we approved earlier this year. Half of that work is done. And that was the outside ones that involved drilling through the outside of the building and some really more difficult work. And then we have the second half of that project was interior cameras. So what we're going to do is we're going to self-install those interior cameras. IT staff will hang those, and we'll have a contractor come in and do some of the little additional wiring. But those changes will free up enough in the budget to purchase this lab out of those funds that were already earmarked. So it's not a completely brand new ask. We found savings in the budget to cover most of this. And that'll give us one computer lab at the high school for tech ed.
And I just want to add one more thing to the budget. The security camera install was coming out of ESSER originally, and these are a qualifying expense under ESSER, so we would be planning to use ESSER funds for this purchase as well. And like Mr. Stearman said, it wouldn't be a completely new expenditure. We're repurposing some savings from the security camera install.
Any questions?
Just so I'm clear, the original expenditure was coming from ESSER. And so we're going to not really save 35 to 45,000 because we have to pay our tech staff to do this work. But now we will use that ESSER money for the computer lab. And our tech staff has $45,000 worth of time to get this done.
They're quite amazing. Every summer, both our technology department and our buildings and grounds department schedule larger scale projects. Some years it's hanging new TV screens in the front of classrooms or rewiring some wireless access points. This summer, we don't really have a lot of projects, so they had some availability. And correct me if I'm misspeaking.
Yeah, so if we were having a contractor come in and do it, they'd be in and out of this building in a week and all of our security cameras would be hung in a week. If we do it, it's going to take us throughout the entire summer. We'll piece away at certain buildings or certain sections. The good part for us is that these are upgrades to existing cameras for the most part. So we have cameras in these spaces. We're either just putting in new ones or giving us a better view. So we have the luxury of spreading that time out a little bit to be able to do them a little bit slower than having them done. Like I said, we had them come in and do the outdoor ones because those are up on scissor lifts, core drilling through the outside of the building, having to seal that up. Was the bulk of the hard work. or the more difficult work that would require a lot of labor. These are kind of picking and choosing the easier ones to do for us, the inside ones. So
Right.
but
Well-
I think we have enough time to do that.
I appreciate that your crew is willing to take on this extra responsibility in order to make this lab happen. Any one willing to make a motion on this?
I just have one question, just how long do you think this, with the technology that what's the lifespan of this tech that we're purchasing?
Yep, so we are anticipating roughly a 3 to 4 year lifespan, and that's pretty similar with our lifespan for one-to-one devices, staff devices. Typically, technology is on a 3 to 4 year cycle. If you're sticking in 3 years, you're going to be replacing it pretty often, right as it starts to get old. 3 to 5 is what we shoot for. 4 is what I would say this lab would be good for. It will support SolidWorks, which is their primary, for at least 3 years. That's a guarantee because the systems we'll buy will be SolidWorks certified. So we'll get at least 3 years out of this lab.
How many workstations is this?
This is going to depend. Ideally, we would like to see 30. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, 25 to 26 is how many we absolutely have to have the right number in the room for the students.
Yeah, we're looking at 25 for the students in the computer lab if needed, but also some additional computers by the CNC, the 3D printer and all that as well. So it's really depending on what great deals Chris can get.
Yeah,
With it.
it's being flexible. If it's come August and the only model cost X number, we're gonna have to get a couple less computers. If something comes up that's awesome and we can get exactly what we need, then great, we'll do that.
A motion?
I think a motion to recommend to the full board approval of purchase of computer lab for the second department at Sparta High School.
Thank you, Mr. Burns Gilbert.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of this recommendation to the full board?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item F, discussion and possible recommendation to approve Sparta High School graduation date for the class of 2023 under consent, and that recommended date is May 26th, 2023.
Sticking with our traditional Friday of Memorial Day, I'm already getting questions about next year's graduation. So this is a yearly thing that the board set for policy. It's our recommendation that we set the class of 2023's graduation date for May 26th, 2023. That's all we're looking for because the weather and times and that sort of thing are all dependent on Mother Nature. So, but we're hoping to have that placed on consent.
Is there a motion? Thank you, Ms. Pressler.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. McKenna, all those, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item G, discussion and possible recommendation to approve the removal of middle school head and assistant baseball coaches from the Sparta Area School District Handbook under consent.
For the past many years, we've had middle school baseball head coach and assistant coach. And in my 14 years here, we have not had baseball. So it's my recommendation that we remove that to reflect our current practice. And I'm not saying that we won't bring it back, but if we do bring it back, we would bring it back at that time. But recommendation to remove middle school baseball from the handbook placed on consent.
I will make that motion and please place it under consent.
Is
I
there-
would second that. motion.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. Discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item item H, discussion and possible recommendation to approve a musical booster club to Article 617 under consent.
Mr. Hendricks, if I could just say, this group out here has been phenomenal for this whole meeting. And for that, we should probably put them as the first thing next
Yes,
time.
and I apologize
Put 'em
for
right
waiting
before-
that long.
So anyway, before Mr. Erickson and Ms. Schneider talk, but Article 617 is our approved club list that's endorsed by the school district, and the mission statement and leadership of the club is needed for the endorsement. And Mr. Erickson and Ms. Schneider are here to give you that information.
All right, well, thank you for having us and thank you to our support parents and students as well. So we're here looking to start a theater booster club. As most of you know, our theater department and music department is growing and growing. And if you've seen even our last show last year, the caliber has went from here all the way up to here. And I want to continue that as well. So our mission statement for our Theater Booster is the mission of the Sparta Spotlight Players Theater Booster Club is to create opportunities for our students to participate in as many enriching, educational, and inspirational theatrical experiences as possible. And in order to make that happen, we have 8 goals that we have come up with. Our goal 1 is to provide financial support for additional education, scholarships, equipment, and supplies that are not available through the school budget. Number 2, to provide hands-on experiences in producing quality productions for our school as well as our community. Number 3, to create opportunities for students to develop talents, self-confidence, self-esteem through cooperation, collaboration, and respect for the art and each other. Number 4, to develop the spirit of volunteerism. Number 5, to promote attendance at events to reinforce the department objectives and to contribute time and services to support curricular and co-curricular activities for the program. Number 6, to enable participation in theater conferences as well as competitions. Number 7, to provide educational experiences in all aspects of theater by attending professional productions. Number 8, to initiate and maintain an enthusiastic interest for the performing arts among parents, guardians, students, directors, and the surrounding community, as well as businesses. And we have our executive board members. Our president is Holly Larson. Our vice president is Will Culkins. He unfortunately did have to sneak out. Our secretary is Kayleen Holiday. And our treasurer is Christina Benish. Again, thank you so much for allowing us to be here today, and we hope you consider our Theater Booster Club.
With that, we recommend approve the Theater Booster Club placed under consent.
I will make that motion.
Thank
I
you.
will
Mr.
second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Why didn't we have this before?
Well said. You said, why didn't we have this before?
Question? No, okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Item I, discussion and possible recommendation to approve crack filling, sealing, and striping for Herman's parking lot, and that would be under consent.
It's recommended approximately 2 to 3 years after asphalt paving is installed to have it crack filled and seal coated, and it has gotten to that point. It's on our 10-year facility plan. I took just a couple of pictures here to show some of the cracking. It's nothing to be concerned about as long as we address it now, but to defer this could cause damage to the sub base. I'm sorry, next slide. The small cracks, eventually with the water penetrating the sub base, the cracks will get bigger and bigger, and eventually you'll end up with potholes. But if we treat it now, we can spend a little bit now, and the lowest quality quote I got was $38,000 and some change. From asphalt seal and repair, it was $38,100. Show striping was $52,700, and Farner asphalt was $72,039. And I didn't get it into the slides, but I talked to Kevin Christopherson, who is one of the superintendents for them. I asked for a replacement cost today in today's dollars, and it would be $1,080,000. So I would recommend doing this preventive maintenance so that this asphalt will be in good shape for the next 20+ years.
I also wanted to add that we do still have Herman referendum money available. And so this cost can come completely out of those remaining referendum dollars for the Herman building.
Do we need to make that as part of the recommendation, or okay, just wanted to make sure.
I might have heard wrong, but I heard lowest quality. Is that true? Oh, you said the lowest.
No,
I
it's,
swear you
it's
said
the lowest
quote.
bid, but it's a high quality
Oh.
company. We've dealt with asphalt seal and repair for many, many years. But I got the 3 required quotes per board policy.
Is there a recommendation?
What kind of timeline is there?
It'll be after July 1st. It'd have to be a after July 1st project. And then we'd have to coordinate with summer school as far
That's-
as the paving. It wouldn't be all done in one day.
So I will make the recommendation to the full board to be placed on consent to approve the lowest bid by asphalt seal and repair in the amount of $38,100 and to use Herman referendum money for this job.
Thank you, Ms. Presswood.
I would second that.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Further discussion? Yes. Is under consent.
Yeah, you said that.
I
Yep.
said that.
Yep.
yes. I know it was a long motion, but I said it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item J, discussion and possible recommendation to approve the 22-23 WIAA membership renewals for the high school, Meadowview, Sales, and High Point under consent.
Attached in board docs was the documents for the middle school activities and the high school activities and the sports that are offered. And the third page is another form that would allow High Point and Sales students to also participate in our sports or WIAA sponsored sports. So it's our recommendation to be placed under consent that we approve these and they're accurate according to Mr. Blaha and Mr. Sanders.
Mr. Hendricks, I'd make the recommendation to full approval of the board, the 2022-2023 WIAA membership renewals for Sparta High School, Meadowview, Sales, and High Point, and to have it placed under consent, please.
Is there a second to Mr. Schulze's motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Burns Gilbert. Further discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item K, discussion and possible recommendation to approve the renewal of NWEA map testing renewal under consent.
All right, there was a question about what NWEA stands for. It's the company that has the map testing. I had to look it up, but it's the Northwest Evaluation Association. And MAP stands for a measure of academic progress. Next slide. So the measures of academic progress is our MAP testing, which measures the academic for math and ELA for our students, grades 1 through 10 for both ELA and math. I was asked for a little bit of history. We started, according to some of the data I was able to pull, we started approximately in 2006, about 2007. There was some change in some of the years. We did some Aspire testing in some of the grades. So it was really restructured in 2019, where we really pulled from grades 1 through 10 so we could see that longitudinal data over the years. It is an adaptive test, so it tests students based on their answers. So as they get them right, it moves them up, and as it moves them down. So that really helps our teachers to drill down to the specific skills that each student needs to be able to continue to learn and grow. The MAP data gives us also goal-setting tools for our students and teachers, and it also gives us, our teachers, some differentiated instruction based on students' needs and readiness. We do give the assessment 3 times a year for grades 1 through 10 for ELA and math for fall, winter, and spring. And the renewal for the 2022-23 school year is $27,837.50. That's approximately $13.50 per student. There is also, per the Innovation STEM Academy, we do have 65 seats for their science because they need that for their those science scores for their per their contract. So we do also have that in this, and we are moving it to ESSER 3 versus referendum. Are there any questions?
How common is the use of MAP assessments in our area?
Different school districts have different measures for their district. La Crosse used to have stars, but now that they have moved to Fastbridge, I believe. Yep, so several, and West Salem has also moved to Fastbridge, and Holman currently uses star. So it depends on the district and how they use the data. The Fastbridge is newer. I'm not sure how they're using that data at this time, but I can look into that.
Maybe more importantly then, how are we using the data?
How do we use the data? Great question. What we've been doing is we use it per classroom and per grade level. So I'm going to have reports for you at the end of this month. I'm going to show you growth of our students per the district. Also have academic, how close we are to the norm score per grade level and per building. There's many different ways we can use the data. So for example, at the middle school, they break it down per class and they have how they're growing, and then they pull goals based on their data. So so the 5th grade classroom looks at the data and they set goals per the data for their math for the next couple weeks until they take the test again. And then they look at that growth per those skills that they chose as a PLC. So they really look at it during their PLC, they set goals based on the data. And then when it's given again in the winter, they look at that and they can celebrate and then look at how they can keep improving.
So are some rooftops are using the data differently? You said the middle school is doing it that way. Is Herman doing the same? And
They have different processes for the different PLCs. So for example, at 1st grade, they'll look at the data, they'll decide what they're going to focus on. It's similar, it's just different how they're looking at it at this point. It's based on the different grade levels.
Sorry, the MAPS testing also gives parents the vision of their children's growth year after year and even season after season, correct?
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about having it grades 1 through 10, because then you can see your child's growth over time.
And do we have a number of students who opt out of the MAPS testing?
There are a few. We don't have to accept students to opt out of MAP testing because it's a district test. We do have to allow students to opt out of state testing per the DPI for 4th and 8th grade. We typically don't, we haven't denied a request as of yet. Because we really do use that data internally. We really want, we don't, I wouldn't give you Leah's scores up on a score sheet. That would be, your students' data. We use it as an internal measure. So we want to encourage everyone to take it, but we have made a few exceptions.
Right. And so then the teachers and the students generally accept this and are excited about these tests.
Yeah, they're really starting to grab on to, as they set those goals. Students can see their score right away, so they know if they met the goal, if they didn't, they fell short. There is an option if they really had a bad day to retake that test also. I did that many times as a teacher. If I knew a student had a bad day, I'd give that student an option to take it again so we could get a more accurate score.
Motion to approve? I'll make the motion to recommend to the full board the renewal of the NWA MAP testing under consent.
I will second that.
Any further discussion?
I think just one thought I want to add in there is you said the most recent version of implementation was started in 2019, right? We've been using it.
The full 1st through 10th, or 1st through 9th, and then we added 10th this past year.
Okay. I was just thinking of a review might be helpful, especially if other districts have gone other routes, if it's still working, if we're getting the outcomes that we want out of it, just to make sure as that transition happens that would make sense if we're, COVID was thrown in there, but 4 or 5 years after, so. Okay.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Discussion and possible recommendation to approve K4 math expressions renewal under consent.
Math Expressions is our current resource for our K4 students. This is not a new resource. This is the resource we've been using for multiple years, probably since 2006 or before. So we have the renewal for K4 at just a little over $35,000, which is approximately $39 per student. This includes the consumable workbook for each student. It's it allows each teacher to have a digital record of to be able to put in scores, and it also gives the teacher online access and students online access. So if a student has to be at home, or if the parent wants to go in and see what this lesson's about, the students also have that access. Again, this is a cost we are moving from referendum to ESSER 3. Any
Questions?
questions?
I have a question. So this is our adopted curriculum. It just happens instead of a textbook, if we purchase these.
These are the workbooks and then the online resources.
So have we been bringing this back to the board every year?
Yep.
And so I'm unsure why.
Well, it's over $20,000, so I'm told anything over $20,000 I need to bring to the board.
Okay, all right. I like that rule, I guess.
I had a question. Does this include any changes for the one-to-one devices that we had talked about, maybe going away from that for our youngest learners? If this would change that package at all or pricing?
So our kindergarten, we aren't making any changes for the one-to-one devices, but this also would give them access at home. So if you wanted as a kindergarten, it's an online, so it's a web-based. So a parent could go online. They don't need necessarily our device to be able to log in.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Hendricks, I'd make a motion to recommend to the full board approve the K-4 math expressions renewal and placed under consent, please.
Thank you, Mr. Scholze.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Presswood. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item M, discussion and possible recommendation to approve Sparta Area School District Board policies by 5112, 5320, 5420, 5430, 5511, 5513, and 6152 under consent. What I'd like to do is, if anyone would like to remove one of these policies for questions or discussion, let's do that first. Anyone want to pull one from this list or have a question about one?
There is one that was brought to my attention from Ms. Lopez that I just want to make sure is brought up to the group. So policy 5513, it talks about the care of district property. There is a line, I included it in the draft that you all have, and I highlighted it just for your awareness. It states, in no case shall a referral to juvenile authorities be made without prior notification of a parent's, of a student's parent or guardian. We did not originally have that in there. From a district standpoint, I don't know when we would ever do that without involvement of the parent, from this standpoint as far as care of district property. So I would agree and recommend that we would include that in that policy. So I just wanted to make sure that I brought that to everybody's attention, that that was a change from the workshop.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Lopez. Anyone want to pull one of those policies? If not, I would be open for a motion to recommend all of them to the full board.
I would make that motion.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second to recommend approval of those policies as listed under consent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item N, discussion and possible recommendation to approve classified employee compensation for 22-23 school year.
Mr. Hendricks, before we jump into this, I'd ask that we take a 5-minute break.
Approved. I guess I got
This
the
is-
authority to do that, right?
Is that okay? All right.
All right. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Recess. Thank you. All right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. We are on item N, discussion of possible recommendation to approve classified employee compensation for 22-23. Ms. Hauser.
Before Leah gets going, I want to thank her for all the information you are going to be seeing tonight and in closed session. The amount of work and effort she has done and collaborated with local peers and statewide peers has been phenomenal. So thank you very much, Ms. Hauser, and she's done a wonderful job keeping the directors and myself informed. So Ms. Hauser?
Thank you. All right. So we have classified staff wages as this agenda item, and later on in tonight, we have certified staff. And then in closed session, we have middle management and administrators. So to get the conversation started, certified staff, which is our teacher group, is the only group that we have some more prescribed rules with the negotiation process. The other three groups do not have union, and so it's up to the school board as to how we determine and set the compensation for the following year. To aid in this process, I went with a methodology that we've talked about before, whether we're talking about performance measures or budget measures, and that we look at our regional like peers. And for the sake of the conversation, Holman, Onalaska, La Crosse, Toma, West Salem, and ourselves are who we consider like peers. And I can tell you that each of this districts, we are also in their like peer category. So these are the districts that collaborate quite often together. And quite honestly, when we see staff move district to district, these are typically the districts that have the movement with each other. With our classified staff, we also compete with the local private sector. So the different employers within our communities, many of them are looking for the same qualifications and experience that we are in these classified positions. And we have talked about this before at previous meetings, but when we looked at, and I'll go through the data shortly, but when we look at both our regional peers and the private sector, what we've concluded is that many of our classified positions are being paid under the current market rates. And so the data that I'm showing you in the future slides is going to go through that and show our variances. So if we go to the next slide, some things to consider as we look through this data is, do we look at giving a cost of living increase? And it's been noticed that we have reached an agreement with the SCA that we're making a recommendation to the school board later tonight that the CPI we are using for the certified staff is 4.25%. CPI per the Department of Revenue this year is 4.7%. So we could use one of those numbers or we could use something completely different. Also, when we look at the market and not being competitive within the market, we may decide that in addition to or in place of applying a CPI increase, maybe we want to use a different strategy. And one of the strategies of being within 5% of our average like peers, that's a strategy that many districts across the state use. And so 5% isn't a number I came up with. That's kind of the norm as we share information within our CISAs and within our peers across the state, being within the average of whoever you consider your like peers to be. And so that isn't something we have to do, but maybe something to consider. Another consideration is we have 6 districts in our like peer group. Maybe we want to be in the middle. So what would it look like if we were number 3 in that group? So not the highest, not the lowest. These are just some options for discussion's sake. We can, as a board, decide if we like any of these options or if you'd like me to run a different scenario, I surely can before the next board meeting. So with that being said, we'll just go through the different employee categories. So the first is secretaries. All of these slides, the districts are in the same order. They're in alphabetical order. Sparta is highlighted in that light yellow color. So you can see the hourly rate for this school year, the school year that just ended. And many of these positions, district to district, have a low and a high number. For the sake of comparison, I took the high number in every district. That doesn't mean that all of our secretaries make that amount, but for comparison's sake, that's what you're looking at. And then that final column there is the rank. So 1 through 6, who has the highest pay and who has the lowest pay. In the gray at the bottom is the regional average, leaving us out of it. So if we take the average of the 5 other districts in our region, what is the average pay for that position? And in parentheses is how far we are off from that pay. So again, I had mentioned earlier, sometimes 5% is an indicator others use. So I'll just give you a second to look at secretaries, and the rest follow the same format. So the next slide is cooks. So this is our nutrition team in the kitchens. You can see we're at 1584, which is number 6 in the region with an average of 1734. The next slide is head cooks. We are at 1750 this year. Toma does not employ head cooks, so out of 5, we're number 5 with the regional average of $20.22, or a variance of over 13%. The next slide is educational assistants. This rate, I have a note there. We do have some educational assistants who do help with diapering and feeding tubes and other services for some of our students. And if they do those additional duties, they do receive an additional 25 cents per hour. So all of the rates on this list are not the special education EAs. These are the regular education EAs, so that we're comparing equals. Sparta is at 1629, or rank 6. The regional average is 1776 with over an 8% variance. The next slide is custodians. Sparta is at 1785, which is number 6. The regional average is 2084, which is a 14% variance. In addition to looking at our custodial rate, we also have identified a need in our night shift positions. So we have in our 3 large buildings, Herman, Meadowview, and Sparta High, a night shift custodial team. And right now there's no lead or point person. So during the day, we have a head custodian. And we've identified a need for a point of contact, in essence, who can take the direction from the head custodian in the day shift and make sure those directions are followed with the evening crew. And so it wouldn't be to the level of a head custodian, but we would like to add a differential of 50 cents for that. So it would be 3 custodians that would get a differential to be that point person. And the next slide is our head custodians. And we have 3 of these at our 3 largest buildings. They're at 2125. Toma, like head cooks, also does not have head custodians. We are number 4 of the remaining 5. And the regional average is 2249. And so we're just over 5% variance. The next slide is our maintenance team. In Sparta, they're at 2175, which is number 4 out of 5. And Alaska does not do not employ separate maintenance workers. The regional average is 2396 with about a 9% variance. The next slide is our health aides. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to collect the data yet from La Crosse and Alaska, which is why those are yellow. And this position is a little more difficult because the structure is different district to district, which Ms. Kool-Aid could fill you in more if you have any questions, but in essence, some districts have multiple school nurses as their model. Some districts have a nurse with health aides that they oversee, which is the model that we use. And so this one's a little bit more challenging just because of the different models different districts utilize. The next one is our computer techs. In Sparta, they're at a high of $25 an hour, which is number 6, with an average of 26.12, or just over a 4% variance. So those are all of the data without applying any of kind of the ideas or, starting points for discussion. If we go to the next slide, there's a lot here, but basically what it is down the left-hand column is the different positions that we just went through one by one. In yellow, that next column is the pay rate that I identified as we went through the slides. The next column is if we were to do CPI of 4.25, what the additional pay rate would be on each of those positions. The third column is if we did CPI of 4.7. The next column is if we did that 5% of market. So if we took that regional average and got within 5% of it, what that rate would be as an additional on the hourly rate. And then the last column is if we had a goal of being number 3 in the market or in the middle of the market. So those would be the increases per position under those 4 different scenarios. And again, this doesn't mean that we are committed to any one of these 4. We can run more scenarios, but this is a starting point for conversation. And then if we go to the final slide, this is doing some cost estimates of what each scenario would look like. So you'll notice the number of classified employees in each of the scenarios is the same at 163. If we look at the 21-22, so the school year that just ended, if we look at those wages and adjust for anybody who's probationary, so within the first 3 years of any classified position, they get a little bit of movement for being probationary. So the adjusted 21-22 wages before any CPI or anything is just over 4.3 million for our classified group. Now, I want us to keep in mind that we talk a lot about the budget deficit, and that's our general operating fund, which doesn't include nutrition services. That does not include cooks and head cooks. They are in their own fund, which is Fund 50. So that's why the additional cost I broke out into 2 separate numbers. So Fund 10 and 27 is our general operating budget. That's the budget that we've been looking at the deficit. Fund 50 is an independent fund. So that's the difference there. And then you can see the projected wages for next year. So the budget deficit we talked about earlier tonight of the 425,000, that incorporated a CPI of 4.7. So a CPI of 4.7 is what was built into that current deficit we looked at earlier. That does not mean that's what we need to do or not do. That's just what was included in the current deficit. So if we did a different action, you can see the additional cost impact or the lower cost impact. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Mr. Hendricks, if there's any questions or.
Thank you. I have a question. If you would go back to like slide 67 or something. Bad example, go to 66 for me. Here we go. So math isn't my strong suit, but when you calculate this way, and first of all, let me say that I fully understand that we are low when it comes to wages. So I'm not arguing anything different, but I'm not sure I understand the reasoning behind taking Sparta's hourly rate out of the regional average. And the reason I say that is because we're typically at the bottom. Taking us out of the average, to my thinking, accentuates the percentage difference from the regional average.
We definitely can add them back in.
But I'm not saying that you need to. I'm just. Is that typically how districts calculate this? I mean, I'm just not unsure how the thought process.
Yeah, that's correct. So through CISA 4, which is our local where we share data, that's the calculation that we use is you back out your district so that you see what the true average is. If you're so far off, you could skew. That's not saying it's right or wrong. I can run it both ways, but
Well, the point
Yeah.
is, you've made the point that we're low, but I'm thinking if I'm if I'm a lacrosse and I omit our wages from the regional average, lacrosse people are going to think that they're way overpaid
Mhm,
because it's going to severely skew it in the
Mhm.
other direction.
mhm.
But anyway, sorry. Other questions?
Do we need to look at these as one bucket, or can we adjust different positions, different percentages or amounts?
There are no rules, so it's what the board wishes. Historically, I've seen it both ways with our school board. So
Which positions are we finding to be hardest to fill?
all of them that have turnover. So, and why I say that is, for instance, our secretary positions don't tend to have a lot of turnover. So it's hard for me to say if they're hard to fill or not. Custodians, cooks, educational assistants, we have gone with extremely long vacancies. Health aides, we've had a lot of, nearly all of them, if we have turnover, we have had difficulty filling them.
And I don't mean this to say that those that have steady fill doesn't mean that they're not underpaid, but I think we need to
I did not-
prioritize
Yeah.
those that have turnover and we can't hire.
Yep. And I didn't take it that way. I'm just, we have had positions sit vacant for quite a while. And when we do get applicants, when we were used to applicant pools in the double digits, sometimes we're lucky to have just a few applicants to pick from. So not only is it, are we having positions sit vacant, when we do get applicants, it's not extremely competitive.
And I know during discussions, we talked about that 5% of market. If you go back to slide 72, please. We were taking a look at what the budgetary impact would be. And then I know during our director meeting with Mr. Russ as well, let's just get to the middle of the road. Let's see what the budgetary impact, if we went across the board and we got to number 3 within our local market to try to be competitive. And so again, it was part of the process of, we are in a major need of an adjustment because we're so far out of the realm on a number of our classified staff. Is the time in place right now? I think that's a great conversation for us to have as a team. But if you look there, I mean, actually getting to number 3 in the market where we're competitive with our area districts is actually a little less than if we were going to do that 5% of market. So obviously it's considerably more than the CPI, either one of those calculations. But at what point are we going to make the adjustment? At what point is it smart to make the adjustment? Those are the conversations we need to have right now.
I would like to, at some point, see what being number 4 in the market, the impact of that, because when we say middle of the road, it could be 3 or 4.
Absolutely. And I can also, I have a spreadsheet that is all formula driven. It would be very easy for me to add Sparta back into the average too. So I can run both of those, no problem.
I mean, I'm not hopeful that we can even afford to be number 4. I mean, an additional $500,000. Well, it wouldn't be, because some of that is already figured. 200,000 about is already figured in there.
Correct.
So it would be another 300,000 likely,
Mhm.
which is a heavy lift.
So I just wanted to understand this because it says number 3 in market was CPI. Does that mean we're adding CPI in addition to, or?
Great question. So when we compare to our peers, we're comparing 21, 22 rates. I don't want to say all, but nearly all are looking at the full 4.7 for their classified staff. And so if we try to get to number 3 on this year's rates, we're already going to be behind going into next year. So in essence, in the bigger spreadsheet that comes down to this graph, I calculated CPI on each of their wages so that we're looking at next year's numbers.
Which Mr. Hendricks brings into the thought process. That was kind of why I went with number 3, is because I know that all districts are going to be stepping. And so the number 3 number this year would be, it would be a little less for us compared to other districts next year because they're all maybe making a bump.
And
But your calculation includes that.
There's a bump included.
yes, mine does. Yep.
Sorry about that.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And I also would point out that a couple of years ago, we were more competitive because of the challenges in finding people to fill vacancies and the competitiveness. Many of these districts did mid-year adjustments the school year that we're in. So, you know, right in that December, January mark, they were going back and approving wage adjustments mid-year, which we did not do. And so if we would look at the same data a couple years ago, we probably were a lot more competitive, but they're responding to what they're seeing in the marketplace. And that's why we haven't done any responding yet, basically.
So where do we go to from here? Are we then just going to collect more information and come back at a future time? Is that kind of what you were looking for at this point?
So as far as the timeline, I mean, statutorily, we don't have a timeline, like, we have a more defined timeline with teachers with our contracts and things. So what I think of when I look at this is we have the full board meeting that I can bring back this for more discussion. July 1st, all of our year-round positions start. That doesn't mean we have to have wages locked in by July 1. What it does mean is if we still haven't determined it, we being the payroll department would need to go back and do retro pay to true them up back to the first date of the contract. So it's advantageous from a business office standpoint if we figure it out in June, but that doesn't mean we have to. We'd rather make the right decision whenever that would be.
Also, from the employment side, our goal was set it at July 1st. So when we start to post externally for a lot of our positions, when we get it on our website and Indeed, we could actually put the real wage there rather than a lower wage, which some people are saying, I'm not going to come to work, not just the school district, but forever, whatever organization is, until we know what that wage is, and hopefully it'll be higher to attract and maintain and retain some of our current staff.
I wonder from a mindset brainstorming standpoint, so everybody is starting to kind of understand the process and the thoughts of why the numbers are the way they are. Would we want to entertain a workshop prior to the board meeting where we can delve into this a little further? You know, you could provide a couple of the additional requests, and then we could come together as a team and then have a plan going into the board meeting.
Yep, and I'm also wondering if our discussion a little bit later about budget shortfall would help inform the decision too. So I have that, I'll run it with if we were number 4. I'll redo the 5%, including Sparta. Are there any other actions you would like me to run that I can even share it out ahead of time through the weekly notes or what have you too.
I would have one, just because it would, even though it will make us a little bit behind at the same time. Can we do number 3 and mark it, but instead of bumping it up to CPI, we bump it up to the nearest $0.25. So if they get bumped up to $17.21, they get bumped up to $17.25 or whatever that is.
I'm sorry, I'm not following your recommendation.
So you take the number 3 in market.
Mhm.
So can we just go back a few slides so then I could show what I mean? No, that's fine. So for example, this one, the regional average is 2612.
Mhm.
So instead of bumping up the regional average by CPI, you'd bump up that one by the nearest $0.25.
I follow you. Yep, okay.
Any other questions? Otherwise, Mr. Schulze, so you're suggesting prior to the full board meeting, which starts at 7, we would get together at?
I'm completely open to options. That would be just fine. Yeah,
6 o'clock?
Sure.
perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
let's plan
All
for
right.
that.
The only other thing I'd like to see, Leah, if you could you bring the number of open positions we have for each one of those categories? Thank you.
Okay, unless there's further discussion, we'll go on to the next item. Discussion of possible recommendation to select future board workshop topics and dates. We just set one. Yes.
One piece, I think, just have some thoughts to get out there, but I think as a board, it makes sense to have a yearly development model for us as a team, to develop board goals, to develop, right, some of our connections and build some of that into the future. And so I think that's one piece that, whether that's a separate workshop or an agenda item in the future, I think we should definitely bring some thoughts and ideas together. That's kind of where we were headed last August before things went the way they did. And so being able to not only build board goals for us to have some better direction for our admin and our employees, but also having us identify some of those priorities that, thinking of the example from my lens, a community engagement goal would make sense, right? And so being able to create some structure that'll last hopefully beyond all of our terms that future boards can use as reference and use to feedback and evaluations and kind of benchmarking. So that is one of my recommendations. I don't know how you want to frame that succinctly, board development model, but really a chance to have something in place so that we can dive into that governance structure and make sure that that's, especially if we're going to keep having high turnover for board positions too. So I would offer that as a recommendation. And then I already talked about community engagement, but I feel like that would come out in that conversation.
And Mr. Burns Gilbert, I think elaborating on that too would be to establish some solid board goals. So not these general broad statements, but actually some attainable, goals that we can really measurable goals. Yeah. So we could make that part of it. Yes.
And I would suggest that that not be a item on a long agenda, but separate.
So we'll reach out on those.
Other suggestions?
I was just, oh, I'm sorry. I was just wondering if perhaps in that same type of workshop, we could have a model or something where we could look at the board and the district from a larger perspective, because I feel like we're taking this piece here at this time, and then we're looking at that piece there at that time. And I think if we could see it as a whole and maybe have a timeline of when to talk about things or when to discuss things laid out ahead of time, that might be helpful for new board members, and it might be helpful because I feel like I'm asking a lot of questions maybe out of turn. I'm not exactly sure. And just maybe not necessarily a board workshop for new members, but just looking at it from a bigger picture as well might be helpful.
Mhm.
Completely different topic, but I think very relevant in the world today. I think we need to look at school safety. I think the community would really like us to get our heads together and look and decide if we feel our schools are safe enough, especially maybe active shooter wise for our community.
So speaking to that, we do have a crisis response committee and we do have a safety committee. So I would strongly recommend, let's see, we can't have a quorum, but if there's some interest there, be a part of that because it is phenomenal. I mean, it's pretty special committee. So
I'm not sure that the community knows what's coming out of those though.
that's a good point. Yeah, for sure.
And if we do want to have, if more than 3 board members want to be involved with that safety committee, we'd be happy to post it, as such. I can tell you that in July, we're going to have a tabletop exercise with the Sparta Police Department to continue those discussions about school safety and different scenarios and that sort of thing. So it is on our radar and it's a top priority So we're working through that as well.
And part of the crisis response was it's kind of a crawl, walk, run scenario. And so the tabletop is part of that walk process. And then we move towards an active type scenario. We had a number of situations last year where we brought an ambulance into Herman, and played something out so that we could see how everybody within the community responds, give our ambulance service or police services the opportunity to be active within the school. So
Other topics?
So I'm attending the WASB's Summer Leadership and Institute, and I would like to, if we can make that an agenda item, because that's in July. So if we can make that an agenda item or something so I could discuss my findings and just have a comprehensive report for you guys.
We could put a report on in one of the July items, and we'll work together on that to see the appropriate time.
with that, Mr. Hendricks, I'd move to adjourn.
We have a second?
Yes.
All right, we have a second, Mr. McKenna. All those in favor, say aye.
I
Opposed?
Oh, I'm sorry. We have announcements. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, Mr.
Ooh, I jumped
Schulze.
the gun.
Nope, no,
Sorry,
no,
Mr. Russ.
nope, it's okay. I'm sorry. I was writing down Todd's WASB stuff. Just a couple of announcements to get ready for later in this month, full board meeting, the 28th, which is at 7 PM, which now we have a board workshop at 6 PM prior to that. And ISA was awarded an expansion grant by the DPI, which is a big deal, and will be bringing forth more information to the board for approval and that sort of thing. And with Miss Brigham's resignation, moving closer to family in a different position, we will be looking for a Board of Education member to sit on these interviews for the formal interviews on the morning of the 28th. So if you are interested in that, please let me know. Mr. Schulze's already said that he's wanting to sit on that. So please shoot me an email if you are interested in doing that as well. It'll be the morning of the 28th.
Anything else?
I don't believe so.
All right, we are adjourned, and we will take a short break before